Welcome to Vega Rising, a space between worlds, where maps are drawn in stardust, where the soul remembers, and the mystery is you. Right now, the world is loud, fast, disorienting. But if you're listening, maybe you've started to feel something deeper, that all this chaos isn't just collapse, it's a much-needed transition. Your work, our work, isn't to fix the old world, but to contribute to a new one. It's to stay rooted, steady, and clear, and contribute to what's next, from the inside out, centered, strong, and calm. Because as the external noise rises, so does the need for personal transformation. It's not optional, it's how we stay sane, awake, whole. Even though the pressure points, the purging and possibilities I'll discuss today are based on a specific astrocartography, the personality shedding and transformation applies to many. They touch every human who's ever worn a mask to survive, every soul that's tried to succeed by abandoning itself. I invite you to listen, to feel, to reflect on your own. Some of it might echo your own. In the end, it is all one human story. Every person who's reached the breaking point, only to realize it was actually an opportunity for a new beginning. So if you're listening, and you've ever felt that tension between who you are and who you've had to be, this message is for you too. In astrocartography, locations are charged with multiple planetary influences. Each one presses on a part of the psyche, and depending on how it's met, it either becomes a breakdown or a breakthrough. So let's begin. Let's talk about having Chiron on the midheaven. The midheaven, or MC, represents your public identity, how you show up in the world. Your career, your visibility, your legacy. It's what people see, or what you hope they'll see. Chiron, on the other hand, represents the wounded healer. And when it sits near the midheaven line, there's often a fracture in how you relate to success, recognition, and being seen. Not because you aren't capable, but because deep down, you never felt truly seen for who you are, only for how well you performed or behaved. You may have learned early that success equals safety, that doing the right thing earns praise, that being serious, disciplined, or helpful got you love, or at least less conflict. So your identity became structured around performance. You became responsible, capable, maybe even the one others relied on. But at what cost? You learned to organize your public self around being impressive, being good, being driven. You began chasing visibility, not because your soul wanted to be seen, but because some part of you needed to prove that I am enough. Now let's talk about the impact. What happens if you continue living from that part of the personality self? If your public identity stays wired to the wound, if your work, your voice, your visibility are still shaped by the fear that you're not enough underneath it all, you might feel like you're constantly performing. Even when you're succeeding, it doesn't land. The praise doesn't stick. The inner emptiness returns. You might struggle to rest. Because rest feels unsafe. You only allow ease after you've earned it. You may overfunction in your work life. You say yes when you mean no. You over-deliver, and secretly, you resent it. You might measure your value by how much you get done, how many people respond, how many people approve. You begin to disappear behind the mask of success. And when the mask slips, it can feel like collapse. Because if you're not performing, then who are you? The key is to understand that you are not your identity or personality you have adapted, that you actually can transform that. That's what we'll look at next. So what happens if you integrate the Chiron wound instead of operating from it? To integrate a Chiron wound or any wound means you no longer let the wound unconsciously drive your choices. You recognize the wound for what it is, a part of your history, not your identity. Think of it as an old, outdated energy that no longer serves you. You stop organizing your self-worth around the pain or the compensating behaviors it created, like overachieving, people-pleasing, self-erasing. You shift from reacting out of the wound, such as needing to proof, to fix, and to strive, to responding from wisdom, such as sharing, creating, and expressing from your authentic self. Integration means becoming aware of what used to be on autopilot. It's when you make something you weren't aware of conscious. You are now aware of it. When you reach these moments of awareness, you stop basing your career, visibility, or leadership around proving your worth. You begin to speak, create, or lead from a place of inner alignment with your authentic self, not from a fear of being unseen or unvalidated. You can still be successful, but now the motivation changes. It's not, I need to be seen to feel worthy. It's, I feel safe enough to be seen as I am. You're no longer ruled by the wound. It becomes a source of quiet strength, not chronic suffering. In simple terms, operating from the wound means the pain controls your path and the choices you make from that wounded space. And that's the key in any aspect you want to transform. Ask yourself, which part of me is making this decision? Where am I operating from? From the wounded self or the authentic soul self? Integrating the wound means you acknowledge the pain, meaning creating self-awareness around it, find tools and techniques to transform it, and no longer let it be in the driver's seat. You no longer chase external approval. You express from a new found inner truth and strength. Your visibility becomes an act of alignment with yourself, not survival. You stop asking, am I enough yet? And begin to live from a quiet inner knowing. I always was. You begin to redefine success on your own terms now. Not what earns praise, but what feels aligned and authentic to you. What brings you peace? What reflects who you truly are? When Chiron on the midheaven is healed, you don't stop being visible. You just stop performing for visibility and being seen. You speak because you have something to say, not because you're trying to prove something. You allow your public path to reflect your private truth. You become seen from your authentic self because you've stopped hiding behind the mask. So pause here with me. Take a breath and ask yourself, gently, what if I stop chasing success to prove I'm worthy? What if I let myself be seen as I truly am, without the polish, the mask, the performance? What if I can be seen for who I am and could feel safe at the same time? Now try saying this quietly, just to yourself. I no longer need to perform to be valuable. My presence in my own truth is enough. Sit with that for some time and see what comes up for you. Let it land. Let it be true. Let it be enough. Next, let's talk about Pluto on the IC and what it means for the human journey. But before we do so, if you're listening and feeling intrigued, maybe even a little stirred by something we have covered so far, and resonate with this as you navigate your own journey, and you feel it supports you in your own clarity and awakening, then consider subscribing so we can keep growing this community together. The IC, or Imum Coeli, is the base of this chart. It represents your emotional foundation, your childhood, your sense of home, and the inner root system that everything else grows from. When Pluto sits near the IC, the very soil of your life gets stirred. This isn't a surface transit. This is excavation. It pulls up the buried patterns, family dynamics, emotional memories, ancestral conditioning, often before you even realize what's happening. This placement doesn't ask you to tweak your routines. It asks you to confront the structure that holds them, to question the definition of home, safety, and belonging that you've inherited. So let's look at what this might have felt like growing up. If Pluto is active near your IC, you likely didn't grow up feeling truly safe. You may have been in environments where control, power, silence, or emotional volatility shaped the atmosphere. Even if things looked normal on the outside, the emotional energy was intense. Maybe someone held power over you. Maybe you learned early to read the room, stay small, keep the peace. So the part of you that was supposed to feel safe instead became skilled at survival and dodging the bullets, so to speak. Over time, this often creates a pattern where you build emotional walls. You don't let others in easily. You become strong, but underneath that strength is exhaustion, because you've been holding it all together for a very long time. Now let's talk about what happens if you continue living from this part of the personality self. The costs if you continue like this. If you stay identified with the emotional armor. If you keep using control to feel safe. You may struggle to let anyone close. You may sabotage intimacy or never fully trust it. You might isolate when things get hard, because vulnerability still feels like a threat. You might repeat the same emotional dynamics from childhood, just with new faces. And worst of all, you might confuse being alone with being protected. But you're not meant to stay underground. Now let's look at the other side. Not just what it means to integrate Pluto at the IC, but what becomes possible if you step into your soul-aligned self. Integration begins with awareness, self-awareness. It means recognizing the pattern, naming it, and seeing what it costs you. It's a shift into observation, like zooming up 50,000 feet above your life and seeing it clearly. Or like watching a play from the audience perspective, as you watch yourself like an actor on stage and begin to see how you acted and behaved and its consequences. That's what integration really is. The ability to witness your own story without being consumed by it. Transformation begins when you choose to step into a different part of you. The authentic self, the soul self, the part of you that no longer needs to protect your truth, but is ready to live from it, your authentic truth. You stop protecting your inner world with walls. You start cultivating it with your own truth from the inside out. You begin to trust that home is not something that has to be earned. It can be chosen, it can be created, it can be safe. You stop carrying your family's unspoken rules in your nervous system. You stop assuming connection will cost you your power. You begin to listen to your own intuition and authentic self, and discern from and make conscious choices from there. Pluto, when healed, becomes inner strength, unshakable, rooted, clear. So pause with me here and take a breath. Ask yourself, where did I first learn that safety came through control? Controlling others, controlling situations, controlling myself, rigid self-discipline, all to force safety. And what would it feel like to let go of that story? You can try saying this now, quietly, just to yourself. I am allowed to be me and feel safe. I'm protected even when I am soft. I no longer need to guard my truth to be safe. I am safe. Let it land. Let it settle into the roots. Because this is where you begin to rebuild. Not from fear, but from inner truth. Your own authentic truth. This time from your authentic self. If you are listening to this today, remember, even though this is not your personal chart, you will still get a lot out of it, as the themes of identity awakening are universal. They speak to anyone who's ever shaped themselves to survive, questioned their identity, or longed to live more truthfully. Next, let's explore the ascendant. The ascendant represents how you enter the world. It's the doorway to your personality, how others perceive you, and how you come to perceive yourself in return. When Chiron forms a square to the ascendant, there's tension between who you are deep down in your essence and the role you've learned to play in order to be accepted. It's not that you were inauthentic, it's that early on you learned, often unconsciously, that certain parts of you weren't welcome, too sensitive, too intense, too quiet, too much. So you adjusted. You shaped yourself into what others could handle. You became adaptable, likable, even invisible at times. You may have found yourself over-apologizing, shrinking in rooms, filtering your expression, worried about being misunderstood or dismissed entirely. And beneath it all, the ache of never quite being reflected accurately, of being looked at, but not really seen. Now let's talk about what happens if you stay in this part of the personality self. If this wound continues to run the show, you will likely keep shape-shifting to fit in. You'll downplay your brilliance. You'll over-explain your truth. You'll avoid conflict even if it costs your self-respect. You may feel anxious in social situations, not because you're weak, but because you're constantly scanning for safety. And perhaps most painful of all, you might internalize the belief that if people don't get you, it must be because you're the problem. But you're not the problem. The mask you've put on is. Now let's look at the other side. Not just what it means to integrate Chiron's square the ascendant, but what becomes possible when you step into your authentic self. Integration starts with awareness. You begin to see the old role you've been performing. You catch the pattern, the reflex to shrink, to please others, or protect yourself. You start witnessing the character you've been playing, from the audience point of view this time, like an observer, not identified as the actor on the stage. And with that awareness, you can choose to step into something different. A self-expression that doesn't require translation. It's for you to know your own truth. A presence that doesn't bend to be palatable. It's okay if others don't understand or get it. You stop filtering your truth for the comfort of others. Be true to yourself and state it with diplomacy and being civil. You stop assuming their discomfort means you did something wrong. Become comfortable with others being uncomfortable. You don't need to remain being a people pleaser. And slowly, you begin to trust that you don't need to explain your essence. You just need to stand in it. You just need to be it. Embody it to yourself, for yourself. So pause here with me. Take a breath and try this. Not for anyone else, just for you. I am not too much. I am not too little. I am exactly who I am meant to be, and I no longer need to shrink to belong. Let it land. Let it be real. Let it be enough. Before we move on, if this content so far has sparked something in you, please drop a comment. What's been opening up for you? Share your insights, aha moments, or any aspects you're still wrestling with and seeking more clarity on. Next, let's look at the next formation, Jupiter trine and sextile to your ascendant, which means your natural growth and expansion are supported. but only when you show up as your authentic self, without the masks or performance. Let me explain. The ascendant is your front door, how you enter the world, and how the world meets you in return. It is the part of your chart that represents how you meet life, how you carry yourself, how others perceive you, and how you express who you are. Jupiter in astrology is the planet of expansion, opportunity, growth, and wisdom. And when it harmonizes with your ascendant, your soul is gently supported, as long as you stop trying to be someone else. Especially when Jupiter forms a trine or sextile to the ascendant, it creates supportive energy. This isn't a placement of tension, it's an open door, one that brings natural ease, charisma, and the ability to grow. But again, let me repeat, only if you're actually being yourself. Let's talk about what this usually looks like. If you've gone through life trying to prove your worth, overworking, people-pleasing, performing for approval, this placement often sits in the background, unused, because you are operating for a compensation out of a lack. Because when you're operating from a false identity, Jupiter energies can't work with you. They can't be activated. The expansion it brings is only activated when you're aligned, when you're not trying to become someone or achieve something, just by being who you are. Let's explore the impact if you stay in the personality self. You might be trying so hard to be better, stronger, more impressive, that you miss the openings that come when you're simply yourself. You may feel like you have to earn every opportunity. You overcompensate. You push for success, thinking it only comes through control or hard effort. You might even block support because it doesn't feel deserved unless you've struggled for it. You might distrust ease, or feel guilty receiving help, or uncomfortable being seen without doing something to deserve the attention. So you chase growth, but it never feels like enough, because underneath it, you're still proving, still performing to make up for that illusionary lack. The more you push, the more things stall, because Jupiter here doesn't respond to pressure. It requires your aligned truth to activate you. Think of it like a secret you now know about to activating a dormant force within you. In order to get activated, you have to dare to be true to yourself. You have to dare to step into your authentic self and breathe, live, navigate, and interact with the world from there. You have to dare to embrace your fears and vulnerabilities and dare to do things differently this time. The only way out is through. Now let's talk about what becomes possible if you dare to step into your authentic self. Things start to work out for you with ease. Doors open, people say yes, support flows in, unexpected but exactly on time. You begin to feel uplifted by something you didn't have to force. You trust life a little more. You start to notice that people respond better when you're simply honest. Not perfect, not polished, just real. And then you trust yourself a little more. And slowly, you begin to grow, not from striving, but from alignment with your authentic self. You experience support without exhaustion, encouragement without having to earn it. Your presence becomes magnetic, not because you're trying to be likable, but because you're not trying at all. So pause with me here. Take a breath and ask yourself, where have I been forcing growth? Because I didn't trust it could happen through ease. What if I stopped trying so hard and just let the real me show up? Try saying this mantra, not to anyone else, just to yourself. I don't need to perform to be supported. I grow by being honest to myself, with others, and stand boldly in my truth. And that's enough. That's all I have to do, be true to myself. Let's briefly look at the activating themes around deep wounding and identity death and power. emotional memory and the nervous system, emotional contracts and inherited expectations from upbringing. Let's explore now the planetary crossings here. We are going to do this briefly, without going full into depth here, as it's already a lot of information to process. In Panama, you're living at a latitude where 3 major planetary crossings intersect. These aren't vertical lines on your map. They're horizontal bands of energy that influence everything in the background. Think of them as the emotional climate you're living in. Each crossing involves 2 planetary forces combining, which intensifies the psychological pressure and deepens the transformation. Let's briefly walk through them. Chiron-Pluto crossing. This is the most intense of the 3. It activates themes of deep wounding, represented by Chiron, and identity death and reclaiming power, represented by Pluto. Together, this crossing pushes buried shame, trauma, and disempowerment to the surface. Eventually, this often leads to emotional collapse, identity breakdown, or loss of control, so that you're forced to rebuild from truth. If resisted, you feel like you're unraveling. You may isolate, overprotect, or fall into emotional spirals. If embraced, you stop hiding the wound, you reclaim your voice, and you build strength from what once felt like damage. Moon-Pluto crossing. This one impacts your emotional memory and nervous system. This has to do with old grief, attachment wounds, and childhood conditioning gets stirred. It's not always dramatic. It can feel like a slow emotional pressure that builds over time. If unprocessed, you may feel moody, anxious, easily triggered, or emotionally shut down. Relationships feel draining, even overwhelming. If worked with consciously, you begin to feel more clearly. You allow emotional release, and you develop real emotional boundaries, not just walls. Saturn-Chiron crossing. This is the crossing of emotional contracts and inherited expectations. It activates your conditioning, especially around duty, authority, and being the responsible one. The pain here is tied to how you were taught to behave in order to be loved or accepted. If ignored, you stay stuck in these old identity roles you've outgrown. You still seek validation through overfunctioning, and you'd still live by rules that don't reflect who you really are. If acknowledged, you begin to grieve the expectations that were placed on you. You question the systems you've obeyed, and you give yourself permission to live differently now, on your own terms, rooted in your authentic essence. If parts of today's message stirred something in you, if you're starting to wonder how your own life story has been shaped by the places you've lived, the moves you've made or want to make, or the tension between who you are and who you've had to be, you may want to explore your own astrocartography map. This isn't about predictions, it's about awareness, about seeing your path with new clarity, and reclaiming the parts of you that have been waiting to rise. So if you're curious, just comment readings, and I'll reach out when I open up a few one-to-one sessions. So let's continue. Together, these 3 power crossings create a psychological environment of pressure, purging, and possibility. They stir your original wound, that's Chiron. Your emotional body, that's the moon. The subconscious past, that's Pluto. And the inherited rules you've internalized, that's Saturn. It's heavy, yes, but it's not punishment. You being here provides an opportunity for deep clearing. If you resist this energy, you stay stuck in old roles, you repeat emotional patterns, and you live your life shaped by pain you haven't fully named. meaning becoming aware of it. Awareness is everything. But if you face it, if you do the work to feel, reflect, question, and release, you gain real freedom, not just from your past, but from the part of you that believed you had to be anyone other than yourself to survive. Before we wrap up for today, let's step back for a moment and look at the whole map. In Panama, you're not just living on one energetic influence. You're sitting inside a complex psychological terrain, a convergence of 4 powerful core lines and 3 intense planetary crossings. Each one pulls on a different part of your story, but together, they shape the full arc of your transformation. Think of these core lines as the direct pressure points. Currently, you're living near Chiron on the midheaven, MC, where your relationship to visibility and success is being healed. This line challenges any part of you that still seeks recognition through performance, rather than coming from your own inner truth. Pluto on the IC, where the foundation of your emotional life, your childhood patterns, your sense of safety, is being excavated and rebuilt. Control and protection mechanisms from the past are no longer sustainable. Chiron square the ascendant, where your identity and self-image are under pressure. You may feel misunderstood or overly sensitive to how others see you until you stop editing yourself to fit. Jupiter trine, sextile ascendant. This is the gift. You're supported in your growth, but only when you stop performing and start aligning. Expansion becomes possible through operating from your authenticity, not effort. Surrounding those power lines are 3 planetary crossings. Think of them as the emotional climate, the deep background frequencies shaping your everyday experience. Chiron-Pluto crossing triggers old shame, identity collapse, and soul-level healing. Moon-Pluto crossing brings emotional pressure, grief, and the resurfacing of suppressed memory. Saturn-Chiron crossing highlights inherited rules and emotional contracts, especially around authority, love, and responsibility. Together, these 4 crossings act like an emotional stir-pot. You may feel everything at once: grief, rage, fatigue, breakthroughs, release. It's not chaos, it's clearing. Let's look at the integration, what this all means. When you look at this as a whole, a clear story emerges. You are being asked to dismantle the version of yourself built around survival, to drop the mask of performance, over-responsibility, and control. To grieve what you didn't get: emotional safety, permission to rest, being loved for who you are. And to step into the version of you that lives from your own truth, from alignment with your essence, from the soul self. This is not a light chapter, but it is a liberating one. Now let's look at the cost of staying in the personality self. If you resist the opportunity presented in this environment, even though it is heavy, if you keep operating from the old identity, you may experience continuous burnout, relationship strain, emotional shutdown, anxiety, or health issues. You may feel like you're unraveling, but in truth, you're just being asked to let go of what no longer fits. So what becomes possible if you step into the soul self? When you stop trying to hold everything together and instead start listening, or in other words, tuning in with yourself, you begin to feel something else underneath. Clarity, calm, authentic power, not control. Another deeper presence, not performance. This is where your work starts to align. This is where people begin to see the real you. This is where peace replaces tension. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop betraying yourself. Let's stop for today. This was a lot of information. We will pick it up again another time. If this content sparked an insight, a shift, or a new awareness today, this community is for you. We're deeply committed to creating value, support, healing, self-empowerment, and transformation. If you resonate with this intention, consider subscribing to this free community so we can keep growing it together. Kindly turn on notifications to get notified. Please share this with someone who might need it right now in their life. And in the comments, let us know what opened up for you today or something you're still finding your way through. You've been listening to Vega Rising, because to rise is to get back up no matter what, and recognize the mystery and strength of your soul deep within you. A mirror, a whisper, assisting you in your own awakening. An invitation to explore, to remember, and eventually to rise again.